Okay. With that, Craig Miller, take it away.
All right, thank you, Michael. Uh, Great to be able to spend some time with the Riverside County Task Force. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here bright and early on a Friday morning. I'm always thinking that we're going to get a groundswell of support to do this later in the day so we can sleep in. But the groundswell of support is always for 7:30 on Friday morning. So we'll continue to do what the audience wants. Really excited to be here. We have a great program today. I'm Craig Miller. I'm the general manager at Western Municipal Water District and the chairman of the Riverside County Task Force. My vice chairman, Jason Uli from Riverside County Flood, is with us today also. So as a reminder, this task force is a coalition of Western Municipal Water District, Eastern Municipal Water District, and the Western Riverside Council of Governments. It's a bi-monthly speaker series, and it's a collaboration of private and public agencies, and the purpose is to educate Riverside County about water. And some of our listeners are outside of Riverside County, which we love, but this is a collaborative effort to bring water to the forefront of our thought leaders in the county. And so we're happy to do it again today. We've had some great programs in the last few sessions. We've had great input, great questions. Reminder, questions will be handled at the end of the program, so you can chat those questions in, and we'll try and get to all the questions. Last couple sessions, we've had way too many questions, so we've had to kind of pick and choose. But let's get rolling for today. Today's theme is tomorrow's solutions today. So it's a discussion of what national, state, and local measures are being taken to effectively address the drought. Everybody's talking drought. Our challenges right now are immense in the water industry with drought conditions. So let's move on. Let's talk about our agenda and get rolling. We'll have first an update from Chris from WRCOG, Chris Gray. Then we'll have our panel discussion, and I will introduce each of the speakers in a moment. We'll go on with facilitated questions and then some closing remarks and wrap it up. Let's go to the next slide. All right, our first speaker today is Chris Gray, the Deputy Executive Director for the Western Riverside Council of Governments. WRCOG is a joint powers authority consisting of 18 cities, the County of Riverside, Eastern and Western Municipal Water Districts, and the Riverside County Superintendent of Schools. Chris is going to give us a brief update on some of WRCOG's current activities. Chris?
Thank you, Craig. So I'm here today to talk about our General Assembly, which will be held next Thursday at Pechanga Resort and Casino. We are excited to have Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple Computer. So if you've ever owned an Apple computer or an Apple device, he has some great stories on the early days of Apple when he was there, as well as also some issues he's passionate about currently. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are attending the event, I know many of you who are on the call today are attending the event. Registration opens at 4. We have a general reception as well as a VIP reception from 4:30 to 6:30. You may ask, how do I get in the VIP reception? We have tickets for those, but if you really want to get in the VIP reception, just come see me. Our dinner event starts at 6:30. What we're calling our leadership address, which is our address by Mr. Wozniak, starts at 7:30. And then we have a post-event reception at the conclusion of the event that'll go till about 10. And all of this is at the Pechanga Resort Casino. Next slide, please. So I did want to give a shout out to our sponsors, particularly Eastern and Western. We have a number of water agencies who are providing sponsorships, but 2 of our biggest sponsors are Eastern and Western Municipal Water District. The event would not be possible without our sponsors, particularly Eastern and Western, and I wanted to just take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge them and thank you. And Craig, that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to turn it back over to you.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. We're happy to be a sponsor. It's a great event. It's really enjoyable, and it's great to be doing it again. All right, let's move on to our first program speaker. Roger Gorky is with us this morning. He has over 30 years of experience in water-related environmental and public health protection at local and federal levels. Currently, Roger is the Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of Water at United States EPA and is now based here in Southern California. In that role, Roger is agency lead for drought and Western water issues, such as the nexus between water quantity and water quality and cleanup of abandoned mines. He serves as the liaison for US EPA with the Western States Water Council and the Western Governors Association with respect to water issues. With that, welcome, Roger. We're really happy to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I'm just to add to that, I'm a born and raised Southern California boy. And spent 15 years in Washington, D.C. and am now in Southern California. So I work closely with our regional office up in San Francisco and the LA office, but I report to headquarters, which makes getting up for these meetings not that difficult since they're 3 hours ahead and they like to schedule meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, so with the first slide, I just wanted to start with a little bit of history of drought work in the US. In 2000, there was a Drought Policy Commission report. And if folks haven't seen that, it's good to review what we talked about 22 years ago and the recommendations from back then. And then in 2012 and 2013, there was a tremendous drought in the middle of the country through Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. And we tried to throw normal disaster recovery aspects at it. And that was something called the National Disaster Recovery Framework. And that's what leads most disasters, whether it's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane. That's what is used for the recovery in a disaster. And then really realized that didn't work very well because, as you all know better than anybody, drought, it isn't a normal disaster. And we need to figure out how to better deal with drought at a national scale. And what we heard from folks doing listening sessions there is the feds are all over the place. We don't know who's in charge, and everybody's off and running, maybe in the same direction, but not even looking at each other. So they don't know each other doesn't know what's going on. So in 2013, President Obama had a climate action plan and the National Drought Resilience Partnership was conceived. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But then in 2015, in the middle of the last major drought in California, the FEMA administrator came to California to visit Governor Brown. And that's when the National Security Council kind of got involved, and they understood, and this was after Superstorm Sandy that hit New York and New Jersey, that natural disasters and whether it's drought or anything like that is a national security issue because it takes out power grids, they can take out water and wastewater facilities, transportation, etc. So we started working together with the National Security Council leading it, and that culminated with a 2016 presidential memorandum that formally established the National Drought Resilience Partnership and had an action plan that was released then and then redone in 2018. So next slide. So the NDRP is official membership at the assistant secretary or assistant administrator level, depending on the agency, or undersecretary if you're at say USDA. The goal is to focus how to better focus federal resources at regional, district, or field level support and get the feds kind of hopefully rowing in the same direction to support state and local efforts. The drought presidential memo and action plan are not what is the federal government doing on drought, a comprehensive list. It is just what are a discrete set of actions that would benefit from better interagency collaboration, rather than it being just, here's a list of everything that everybody's doing. What are different things that we can work on together? The water reuse action plan that EPA led a few years ago is an example of an effort that was in the 2018 action plan that had interagency collaboration and interagency effort that was part of the drought action plan. It's national, not just Western, and it's different than, you know, feds have worked together on a bilateral basis. We work with USGS, NRCS, and the Bureau of Reclamation work together, but what we work for is hopefully an all-in approach at a basin scale, and we've done that in Montana and the Upper Missouri River watershed, and in Oklahoma in the supporting their Southwest Water Action Plan. Next slide. So what's been happening recently? You probably know that the president has a climate advisor who's Gina McCarthy, our former EPA administrator. And under the climate task force that Gina leads are 5 different interagency working groups. There's drought, there's flooding, there's a coastal, there's wildfire, and extreme heat. And I think they've added a 6th. I think it's Arctic, but don't quote me on that. I just saw it on a quick email that they were thinking about it. So the Drought Interagency Working Group is chaired by Secretaries Vilsack and Secretary Holland. And it is more focused on short-term response. What can we do right now to stop the hurt? Versus the NDRP is more longer term. And it's also co-chaired by, the NDRP is co-chaired by USDA and Interior. USDA is the permanent co-chair of the NDRP, and the other co-chair rotates. So the first one was NOAA. We were the second one at EPA, and now Interior is the 3rd co-chair. And getting back to the drought IWG, and I'll make sure that you get a link to the summary report that was just released a couple of weeks ago. The vice president led a global climate security meeting, and as part of that, the summary report was released. And it gives it's not that long, it's about 10 or 15 pages of different efforts that the federal government has had underway. A couple are EPA, talking about our implementation of funding through bill. It talks about WaterSense a little bit, and it talks about an effort that we did in the Central Valley, a pilot of working with small systems there. And we're with the NDRP, we're also working on right now an updated action plan for 2022 and beyond, so that it can help guide us into the next, hopefully, 4 to 5 years of efforts on an interagency basis. The other thing that we've been very aware of is the concept of cascading disasters, and nowhere is this more prevalent than in California, of where you get a drought, then you get, which makes you more susceptible to wildfire, which then makes you more susceptible to flooding or debris flows. And personally, I live in Camarillo, and so we had that just 20 miles up the road in Montecito 3 or 4 years ago, where they, we had the Thomas fire and then had the debris flow there in Montecito. So we are very aware of that connection. Next slide. So I'm going to try to bring it to what we can do here in California, and then I'm going to give a little bit of what EPA specifically is doing. So one of the things that I've been very vocal about internally is the need for us to better work together on a regional or basin scale or statewide scale as the federal family. And that is a portion of the presidential memo talking about the better regional collaboration. Again, as you know, drought isn't something that one community can do by itself and make themselves drought resilient. If you say, I'm going to go to this stream or this river, and when that dries up, I'm going to go to this groundwater source. But if everybody else around you has the same plan, that isn't going to work. And this meeting is a great example of Riverside County working together as the water task force with Eastern and Western Municipal. So about a year ago, we started meeting. We have 15 different federal agencies that play a role in drought in California. And those range from we at EPA to Bureau of Reclamation to USGS, Forest Service, BLM, NOAA, Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, Rural Development, NASA. It's a basic alphabet soup. And we've been the primary role to start with was, do we even know who each other is? And it was pretty surprising that, maybe it's not surprising, that out of the 15 different federal agencies, you had different people that knew each other, but not collectively. And so now we want to start doing things like this, where we can reach out to, we started to reach out to the state Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board, but also reach out to local communities, local utilities, tribes, and others to answer questions so that you know what resources are available, questions about our funding, questions about reclamation's funding, questions about USDA funding, etc. Because if you guys don't know who to call, you're not going to call anybody. So with the State Water Board, we've started working with Department of Water Resources and the implementation of SB 552. And they're still figuring that out. So it's a big piece of it is the statewide interagency task force that we think would be a great way to plug in from a federal perspective, to plug into the state that way. So one of the things about reaching out to you now is, if you don't know who to call, you can call me. And I can try to help guide you to what is the federal agency that might be the most useful or have an answer to your question. So next slide. So here's the transitioning into the what does EPA provide? We have, again, like this California group, we have an internal EPA drought group. And so the way the Office of Water is set up at EPA is I'm in the front office, the immediate office with the assistant administrator. And then we have 4 program offices of Office of Wastewater Management, Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water, Office of Science and Technology, and Office of Wetlands, Oceans, and Watersheds. So this intra-EPA group has got representatives from all those offices, has representatives from other headquarters offices, whether it's the Office of Research and Development, the Office of Congressional Intergovernmental Relations, as well as our regional offices, regions, especially regions 8, 9, and 10, which includes region 8's in Denver, 9 is where we are, and 10 is the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things that has been really exciting to see is how something that happens in region 9, they're trying to duplicate or replicate in region 8 by working with FEMA. So being able to see what's working in a different region, maybe another region can work together, and vice versa. If there's something in region 8 that's working that can help here in region 9. We have lots of technical assistance programs, whether it's WaterSense, water reuse and recycling through our the water reuse action plan that continues to work on the actions that are in the online portal, and getting new actions. And then the individual collaboration with other federal agencies, whether it's working with FEMA or working with NRCS or Reclamation, in addition to what's happening here in California. Financial assistance, you guys hopefully are very well aware of the the SRF program and WIFIA program. We are finalizing fact sheets on drought and wildfire, giving some examples of how the SRFs have been used for drought resilience and for wildfire resilience. We issued a forest resilience bond white paper, and that, if you're not familiar with it, it's and I can provide the link to that. They have a great storyboard. It's up in the Yuba Water Agency. Actually went to the private bond market and got a bond to do forest resilience work in and around their watershed. And they have a great picture of how all the wildfires around their reservoir keep encroaching closer and closer. So they don't know if they're going to get a wildfire in their source water for their watershed and their reservoir. It's when, and can we minimize or reduce the impacts of that wildfire when it happens. The other part of it, again, is just doing a lot of this, talking to leading different basin and watershed scale drought resilience efforts, hopefully on the ground, with folks that are pulling themselves together, again, like this effort, which is a great way to get people on the same page about what's available from the federal level. Next slide. So some of the opportunities that are moving forward is working with FEMA. Drought is a Stafford Act disaster. So if you look at the Stafford Act that guides disaster recovery mitigation, it mentions drought with hurricanes and earthquakes and everything else. There has never been a drought Stafford Act declaration. And so FEMA that doesn't mean FEMA doesn't do drought. That means FEMA has other programs that they're trying to use to help build resilience to drought. And that includes the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, or BRIC, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program. That's national. The HMGP Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is a program that is what we're working with FEMA here in Region 9 about. We're working with them both in California and in Nevada, and also in our EPA Region 8. It's a percentage of when there's a disaster in a state. Say there's a fire in Northern California. A percentage of that funding, usually it's about 15%, goes into the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program to be used for building resilience to any disaster anywhere in the state. So that fire that received federal funding in Northern California could be used for a, say, water recycling project or an aquifer storage and recharge project in Southern California. So that's one thing that we're trying to help FEMA in terms of getting the word out about their funding programs. One of the issues is, I've talked about, we didn't know who each other was at a federal level. A lot of times at the state level, the people in, say, the Department of Water Resources don't know who the person is in the State Water Board, who doesn't know the person in Cal OES that's working on these things. So that was an effort in Nevada to be able to give the Nevada emergency management person expertise within the state in the Department of Water Resources, which they hadn't met before. So little things like that, I think, go a long way. So that's an example of getting the word out on different efforts with other agencies. With NRCS, it's how can we help on-farm funding capture, stormwater capture and recharge? How do we do more integrated basin scale planning? Looking at water efficiency, the WaterSense program has been very successful. How can we work with small systems and tribes dealing with water loss? People always look at a long list of wow, it'd be great if we could do desal. Well, that's the most expensive water there is. Have you looked at what your water loss? Have you done a water loss audit? Like, oh yeah, we're losing about 30%. Well, why don't you start there and help save the water that you already have rather than try to build something that's a couple $1,000s an acre foot with desal. I already talked about the wildfire and the flexibilities. And we also have the Water Infrastructure Resilience and Finance Center. That's where the Forest Resilience Bond paper came out of, that finance center. And we also have environmental finance centers in each region. And it used to be at Sacramento State here in California for Region 9, but don't quote me on that. I can confirm where it is if it's changed. And then water reuse and recycling, again, the implementation. How do we do more water reuse and recycling? Obviously, California is on the forefront of doing that. And so one thing that would be great that I'm trying to do is get successes that are here in places like California that can hopefully be replicated in other parts of the country, and use folks here on the ground as case studies. One project that Eastern has and is receiving funding for is a septic to sewer conversion. Well, Nevada is doing the same thing, but they're quite a bit behind where Eastern is. So could Eastern be provide some technical expertise that would be probably a lot more meaningful than it would be for EPA coming in and trying to give technical expertise? Why not use the people that have already done it? I don't know if I have a next slide. I do not. So with that, I can wrap up, but I think the most important thing is, if you don't know who to call, you can call me. And then I can try to point you in the right direction. Thanks.
All right, Roger, thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite a spider web of organizations and agencies, and it is a value to have someone that you can go to navigate that matrix. Wow. All right, let's move on. Our next panelist is two panelists. So we're very fortunate to have two of our Aqua representatives here today to share some information with us. So I'll do the bios for both, and they'll transition between themselves through the presentation. So let me start with Adam Quinones. He began his career at Aqua in 2018 and is now the State Relations Director, where he oversees the state legislative and state regulatory advocacy for Aqua. His legislative issues include state budget, energy, and water quality. He's been busy with the state budget lately. Prior to joining Aqua, Adam served in Governor Brown's administration as legislative director at the Department of Consumer Affairs, where he had previously served as assistant legislative director since 2015. Heather Engel is also joining us. Heather is an experienced communications professional with nearly 20 years of public information experience. As the director of communications for Aqua, the nation's largest statewide coalition of public water agencies, Heather leads a talented team to oversee the association's comprehensive communications program, including keeping members informed about critical legislative and regulatory issues, developing customizable communication tools for customer and stakeholder outreach, media relations, and public education. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam first. Adam, welcome. Great to have you here with us this morning. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. Thank you for the invite. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Adam Quinones. I'm State Relations Director for Aqua. So I'm over both the legislative and regulatory advocacy, which is really busy right now. We are in the middle of legislative session and budget week. So this is kind of the busiest week for us. I'm going to talk a little bit about budget and infrastructure, in particular, the budget that was passed last year, what is being proposed for this year, and then what are Aqua's priorities still that we are advocating on for the remainder of the year. As some of you may know, the budget process was never really a transparent process to begin with. And then you throw in COVID and virtual testimony and very limited access to the Capitol. And it has been even less transparent this year than it has been in previous. So going back to last year, 2021, we had a historic surplus of $75 billion. We thought that was good, but then we got to this year and we saw an even larger surplus. The governor and legislature last year approved a $5.2 billion package for climate and water resilience that would be spread over 3 years. So, a lot of advocacy on Aqua's part to secure that 5.2. Given the significant surplus, we were hoping for more, but certainly appreciative of the funding that was passed. Some of the highlights of that, I'll just go over really quickly. There were $650 million for the Clean Water SRF State Revolving Fund for various wastewater projects, and $650 million for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And I think Roger touched on those just a little bit ago. There was also $200 million for Central Valley Conveyance to address some of the issues related to subsidence with the Bryant-Kern Canal and Delta Mendota. $100 million for PFAS remediation. For those of you who don't know, PFAS is the chemical compound that is found in lots of water-resistant materials and heat-resistant materials, firefighting foam. Really a problem that is being presented to many water agencies throughout California. There was also $400 million for this combined recycled water and groundwater cleanup fund. Again, a great start, but we know that there are billions of dollars in recycled water projects that are needing to be funded. The $300 million for SIGMA implementation, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and $638 million for flood protection. So again, this is all spread over 3 years. So positive funding, a good step, certainly appreciative of the governor's efforts. This year, as I said, there is a $100 billion surplus, actually $97.5 billion, which is, I think, the largest surplus in California history. And the governor is proposing about $2 billion for additional water resilience and drought response projects. Again, great to see that proposed investment, but given the historic surplus, we feel that water in particular should get a more significant piece of that funding, given the impacts of climate change and everything that water managers are having to deal with right now. And to get a little bit technical, the state has now hit it's called the GAN limit, where we hit the limit of spending that we can put forward to programs. What is exempt from this GAN limit is infrastructure projects, one-time spending on infrastructure. And so we feel like this is the year to invest in water infrastructure, if there's going to be any year. We don't know what the economy is going to look like next year. We don't have a viable water bond on the table for this year or for next year. And so, if we're going to invest, let's do it now while we have this, huge surplus. So what the governor is proposing is $530 million for recycled water and groundwater cleanup. Again, good money. Would hope that would increase. $553 million for urban and small water districts for drought relief. $280 million for implementation of the state's voluntary agreements that were just signed a couple of months ago. $180 million for water conservation, which is great to see as water agencies are being asked to conserve and reduce both indoor water use and outdoor. The state really should be spending money on water conservation projects. Multi-benefit land repurposing, there's $40 million being proposed there, and groundwater recharge $30 million for grants for water districts for groundwater recharge. So that's what the governor has proposed in his January budget and his May revise from about a month ago. The legislature, however, on Monday did pass a budget bill, and it's a really interesting process that the legislature has taken the last few years. But what we've seen is that the legislature, in order to meet their constitutional deadline, they and continue to make sure that they continue to get paid, they pass really a shell of a budget, and they've done this the last few years. And they leave the details of the budget to be determined through subsequent trailer bills, what are called trailer bills. And there's no deadline on those. Those can go until the end of the legislative session into August. So, and that's really what they did. They passed a shell of a budget. The administration, for their part, really don't like this approach. They have really encouraged the legislature to try to work out details by the budget deadline of June 15th. But the two houses, at least in my view, are so split that they often can't come to a consensus until late in the session when they really have to. So, this year, I feel like the administration really lost that battle, and the budget bill, SB 154 by Senator Nancy Skinner, doesn't have a whole lot of detail when it comes to climate and water issues. The two points that they did come to an agreement on was $100 million for recycled water and groundwater cleanup, and then $100 million for dam safety. And this is dam safety. This has been a priority for Aqua for the last couple of years. As some of you may know, there are a number of high hazard dams throughout California that the Department of Water Resources has identified as either being in poor or unsatisfactory condition. And that creates a lot of challenges for local water agencies, not just in terms of public safety. Obviously, if a dam fails, there's a huge public safety risk there, but also in terms of their ability to use that dam and those reservoirs to store water at full capacity. We have a number of Aqua members who have had to drain reservoirs or significantly reduce the amount of water that is stored in reservoirs because their dams have seismic or other issues that have been identified by DWR. So we are really encouraging the legislature to put funding into a dam safety fund. The $100 million is a great start. We are asking for $800 million. I know that sounds like a lot, but some of these dam safety projects are incredibly expensive. And so we're hopeful that that funding will increase throughout the session. What the legislature did do in SB 154 is they created several really big pots of funding and put in the budget bill, literally put in there details to be determined. So the one we're most interested in is this $4.3 billion climate and water fund. And the details of that are going to be negotiated over the next couple of months. There just wasn't enough willingness to figure out what was going to be in this pot of funding by June 15th. And so the legislature, as they did last year, they just included this giant line item and said, we'll consider that later. Again, not the approach the administration wants to see, but that means we're going to continue negotiating on the budget until probably the last day of session, which is fun for me. It makes my summer a little more exciting. So then moving into Aqua's priorities, what are we going to be advocating on for the next few months as we continue to talk about budget? So like I said, dam safety, reservoir operations, that's sort of at the top of our list. We know it's a huge need throughout the state for many Aqua member agencies. We're asking for $800 million for dam safety. Conveyance, that's the other one. There was some funding last year. It was great to see. It wasn't nearly enough. We know in the Central Valley alone, there are several $100 million of repairs that need to take place to make sure that those arterial canals are functioning at full capacity. So we're asking for $500 million for both the Central Valley, but other conveyance projects throughout the state. We're also asking for $470 million for groundwater projects. That includes implementation of Sigma. That includes projects to clean up groundwater that's been contaminated. As I said earlier, PFAS is a huge issue, in particular in Orange County and in that surrounding area. But throughout the state, we see pockets where PFAS contamination has occurred, and the cost of that is going to be really significant for water agencies. We're also asking for funding for recycled water projects, $450 million. Again, the State Water Resources Control Board has a list of projects in various stages, totaling in the billions of dollars. So we think, increasing what the governor's proposing is definitely warranted. And that includes $150 million for desal projects. I just want to make sure that, that's sort of a different fund, but is included in this recycled water category. Like I said, water conservation is also a huge priority. Some of you may be aware, but the Department of Water Resources and now the legislature are proposing to lower California's indoor water use standard significantly over the next 8 years. And so to get communities there, it's going to take a significant amount of investment. So we're proposing $300 million for water use efficiency projects and water conservation projects. Also a couple of others I'll just run through. We are proposing also $75 million for ag water conservation. That's going to be hugely important. More money for flood protection, better water data. So a few categories in there that we are also proposing at smaller levels. So like I said, this is going to be a negotiation between the legislature and the governor and stakeholders, probably till the end of session. That's what we saw last year. The budget went until late into the session, I think even until the last night of session. So we're hopeful that we can increase the amounts that the governor has proposed. We're going to work on this, $4.3 billion pot of funding that the legislature has outlined. And we're hopeful we can get there. The governor and legislature, in lieu of pushing out water bonds, have really taken this other approach of funding these big water projects through the state budget. That's great, but that means that we have to compete with many other categories of funding, and we don't have this dedicated funding stream like we would have in a water bond. So I'm hopeful we can get these numbers increased, to be able to transform California's water system to meet the impacts of climate change. It's going to be this generational push, right, where the state has to invest billions of dollars every year to be able to make that change. So we're hopeful this can sort of be the new approach to funding water, and we don't have to rely so much on bonds. With that, I will turn it over to Heather to talk about what we're doing on the communication side.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, Adam, and thank you, Craig and Riverside County Water Task Force for inviting us here today to talk about some of Aqua's advocacy and public education efforts. Everyone can hear me okay, I assume? Great. So I'm Heather Engel. I'm the Director of Communications for Aqua. And while I'm in Sacramento right now, I did want to mention I used to live in Riverside County. So appreciate the Riverside County Water Task Force. As Adam illustrated, Aqua is a fierce advocate for increased state funding for water infrastructure. In coordination and parallel to that advocacy effort at the direction of Aqua's Board of Directors, Aqua launched a 2-year statewide public education campaign called Quench California. If you can go ahead to the next slide, please. The primary objective of this campaign is to raise public awareness about the importance and positive benefits of investing in water infrastructure especially in the context of how infrastructure is a key part of the comprehensive solution required to manage water supplies to be more drought resilient. We all know conservation is an important tool in responding to drought emergencies, but investments in storage, recycled water, and other infrastructure projects that will help diversify water supplies is really key to that long-term drought and climate resilience. So AquaSoft launched this campaign just last month with the debut of the name and the logo and the website, quenchca.com. It's intended to be a positive, solution-based campaign targeted toward all adult Californians, with a special emphasis on those aged 25 to 45, people of color, and those living in underrepresented communities. And I'll say that Aqua selected that target audience in part because it represents segments of the population that are often overlooked in traditional advocacy campaigns that focus on voters. But also we believe that educating a large segment of the population will lay a foundation for their support of water infrastructure projects now and in the future. And that could range from support for a local water district's project in their community, possibly raising rates for a project in their community, all the way up to a state water bond in the future. We believe that this consumer-friendly logo and visually attractive website will help us to catch the eye of the state's residents long enough to educate them about this important issue in a way that's non-technical and memorable. You know, for those of you on the call today who know about water, know about infrastructure, you know that it can be kind of boring to your average Californians. So we're really going to try to approach it in a way that's interesting to them. And by doing that, you'll notice the name, the word infrastructure is actually not in the campaign name, it's not in the logo, and it's used very infrequently on the website. And you know, part of that is that we did some statewide polling before we launched the campaign to help inform it. And the results showed us, you will not be surprised, a vast majority of the residents don't know what water infrastructure is. And so we're really hoping to kind of subtly trick them into learning by giving real world examples of how it affects their daily lives in a positive way. Another challenge from the polling that we will hope to overcome is that a vast majority of residents didn't view water infrastructure as a top priority for the state. The good news, though, is that when in the polling, when residents were told that investments in water infrastructure will increase the state's drought tolerance and ensure sufficient supplies for the future, well, then their support increased to over 90%. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So for the campaign, we're currently in the process of building out more content on the website, including those specific examples of successful water infrastructure projects and projects that are fun but awaiting more funding. We're also trying to provide examples, again, of, you know, real examples that have an effect on people that maybe they can connect to their daily lives. We're also in the process of developing a number of customizable communications toolkits and templates for our member agencies, which will make it easy for them to incorporate this campaign and messaging into their own education and outreach efforts at a localized level. So take that broad messaging and really make sure that it resonates with their customers and what's happening in their community. Some of those tools will include things like social media posts and social media graphics, newsletter articles, and of course, we're doing a short video series that members will be able to post onto their social media or their websites. We're also going to be launching a paid digital advertising campaign and a social media campaign next month, hoping that that will drive people to the website for more information. And then, of course, we're hoping that our member agencies and other entities will push that content out on their own social media to help amplify the reach of the campaign. Once the campaign's more established, we'll be reaching out to non-AQUA members, such as other government agencies, associations, the business community, and other stakeholders to hopefully build some strategic partnerships and, again, further amplify the reach of that campaign. So in the meantime, I encourage you to check out the website, quenchca.com, and keep an eye out for more information on how you can get involved. With that, I'll turn it back over to Craig.
All right, thank you, Heather and Adam, both great information, and shoot, a lot going on at budget time, and we really appreciate those outreach efforts. And as a reminder, we're accumulating questions. I see them on the chat coming in. If you have a question, put them in now. If everyone starts sending their questions when we get to the question and answer period, we're not going to be able to get to and prioritize them all. So send them in. Just also a housekeeping reminder, make sure you're muting. We are picking up a little bit of feedback on the broadcast. So if you're not speaking, please mute. All right, let's get to our final speaker. Shivaji Deshmukh is with us from Inland Empire Utility Agency. He is a licensed engineer who serves as general manager of IUA with over 20 years of experience in the water industry. Before being at IUA, Shivaji served as the assistant general manager of the West Basin Municipal Water District for 9 years, where he oversaw engineering operations, the recycled water program, and major capital improvement programs. Prior to that, Shivaji did serve with Orange County Water District in several positions, mostly focused on local recycled water development. So with that, Shivaji, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Craig. Want to thank you and the committee for inviting me. I'm always happy to share our story. What I'd like to present this morning is how we're dealing with the drought and some of the unique challenges that we have at Inland Empire Utilities Agency. Also have a couple examples of short and medium term solutions and ways for us to navigate through. So I hope it's an interesting presentation. With that, I'm going to share a little bit about what IUA does, and that sets the stage for some of the projects we're working on. So you can go to the next slide, please. We are a municipal water district, first and foremost, formed in 1950. We're the only metropolitan member agency that's in San Bernardino County, just under 900,000 people in our area, and just under 250 square miles. I really like showing this map here because what it reinforces is the fact that while a number of the water districts, we all have political boundaries, watersheds, groundwater basins don't. And so it just really reflects the need for us to all work together. And one of the things I'm proud about our watershed is how we do coordinate, whether it's through the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, or it's looking at the way we manage groundwater basins. And so as an example, with the Chino groundwater basin, which we're pretty much the biggest regional agency that overlies it. It shows that we have Western as well, overlying that basin. Also, Three Valleys Municipal Water District, another metropolitan water district member agency that's actually in Los Angeles County. So it's very important projects, large-scale projects that are great for addressing challenges like drought, really require partnerships that extend beyond county lines and service area lines. Next slide, please. We are fortunate, as I mentioned before, to be sitting on top of a large groundwater basin. And so about 2/3 of our supply comes locally. We do a pretty good job capturing as much stormwater, recharging recycled water, recharging imported water when it's available, excuse me, in our groundwater basin. So once again, partnerships are important. However, we do rely on for imported water for about 1/3 of our supply. And what makes IUA unique is that because of the plumbing at Metropolitan Water District, we only have access to state water project supplies. And so when we have a drought in the state, like we're experiencing right now, we have some unique challenges because of our lack of access. But like I said, fortunately for us, we do have a lot of local supplies that we can rely on in this time. Next slide, please. In 1973, while we were a water district before that, we entered into a regional contract with 6 of our agencies. Now we have 7, and basically took on the responsibility for collections and treatment of wastewater. We've always had a strong recycling ethic that's brought us today, where we recycle 100% of the flow that comes into our plants. We also recycle 100% of the biosolids. That's a fancy name for all the poop that comes down the sewers. We're able to turn 100% of that into a high quality compost through our indoor composter in Rancho Cucamonga. So it's something we're very proud of in terms of viewing wastewater as a resource rather than as a waste. In addition to that, we work with our retailers to get almost over 30,000 acre feet of recycled water out in 2 different methods, whether that's direct use or we also recharge that recycled water into the groundwater basin. Recycled water discharges are also an important part of a 50-year-old judgment that exists within the watershed to make sure that we're keeping enough water in the river for our partner downstream in Orange County. Next slide, please. We have 5 major facilities when it comes to our water recycling plants, all named in terms of order of how they were constructed. There's some additional information here, but really I just wanted to communicate that we have a connected, decentralized system when it comes to wastewater treatment, and that really provides for a lot of flexibility as we need to expand and update our wastewater treatment capacity as well as facilities. Next slide. I did mention recycled water, something that we continue to look as an opportunity to increase the amount of recycled water that we use. What we're going to be talking about, how we can even better use the groundwater basin and find new and unique ways to get that water in the ground as development takes place within our service area. So I'm going to be talking about that a little later, specifically on the Chino Basin program, which is a large program we're undertaking. That's both a wastewater compliance project and also a water supply reliability project. One more slide before we get into how we're handling, or a couple more slides in terms of how we're handling the drought. I do want to point out on the next slide that while we do provide direct use water, and that as an example, that's for lawns, medians, golf courses, we also do our best to get as much of that water in the ground. The groundwater basin is an excellent tool, not only to store the water, it also treats the water and conveys the water. So it really serves as a treatment plant and a conveyance line. And that's important as we think about how to improve the reliability or the access to water within our region. The last thing I'd like to point out before we go into our current priorities and how we're navigating through the drought, on the next slide, talk a bit about the commitment that our agency has had to renewable energy. This has always been a priority for us as we are a wastewater agency, and wastewater facilities typically use a lot of power in moving the water and then treating the water. Fortunately for us, we have a very tilted basin, so we do take advantage of gravity and get all that sewage into the different treatment plants just using that natural force. But we also require a lot of energy when it comes to treating the water so renewables are extremely important. As you can see here, we've combined a number of solar installations with batteries. We also have a windmill in Rancho Cucamonga. So we've tried to be very creative and leave no stone unturned when it comes to looking at renewable opportunities. With that, I'd like to just get into a few of the priorities that we have, but starting with the challenges we have in the current drought. And while we're all partners and literally right next door to each other, each agency, not only Met member agency, but retail agencies, has different challenges when it comes to the drought. And in the most basic form, it's really what kind of supplies do you have access to? And when it comes time to losing one of those supplies, where can you rely on? So I want to talk a little bit about that specific to IUA. I also want to talk about a project we're currently under construction with that's going to help us with increased recycled water. And then I'll close with the Chino Basin program. Next slide. If you've seen the paper, if you've seen any water talk in the last year, this is a pretty common slide. Red is bad. We've got a challenge when it comes to water supply. And as we've talked about before, imported water is a very important part of our portfolio. And so we don't only look at the precipitation in the south, we have to look at it in the north, where we have typically had storage in the snowpack and reservoirs and partnered that with the California Aqueduct to get water down here. So when it doesn't rain up there, it impacts us down here. So how did we get here to today in June? Next slide. We're in the 3rd year of the driest period on record. We've just experienced the driest 3-month period in the first quarter of this year. And all that results in a very extremely low allocation on the state system. Currently, that's at 5%. And that's a challenge for us, especially for IUA that only has access to that as their imported supply. On the next slide, we talk about how we've addressed this working with Metropolitan, they were looking at different ways to achieve real water savings in areas that exclusively have access to state water project. Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Three Valleys Municipal Water District are a couple of those that only get water from the east branch of the state system. Other areas on the west side of Met's area have different challenges. And so Metropolitan came up with two paths to address how to deal with the challenges we have at the state level. One path was to limit agencies to 1 day a week watering. We felt that that was not the best way to go because for our area, because we have access to local supplies, and we worked with Met to say, hey, how much water do we have? Let us work with our individual agencies to allocate that allocation. And so that is what Metropolitan approved. We have been going down path 2. And 2 weeks in on record, we've been tracking under. So we've got about 26 more to go. We've got 7 months of this allocation, and that's assuming that next year is not going to be dry. And that's something we have to talk about too, because we're not going to make that assumption. So we have to think about the future when it comes to planning. Next slide, please. Just an example of the 6 agencies who are dealing with only access to state project. And this is a monthly limit that we're given. So just under 5,000 acre feet. Lucky for us, Metropolitan's working with the agencies to have monthly shifts. And on the next slide, we show some of the work we're doing with our 3 major customers and how to shift those supplies. As we know, in the summertime, there's higher water demands. And so we wanted to make sure we had access to more water in the first few months, but also commit to saving water at the end of that 7-month period. Next slide. I'm glad we got a great introduction in terms of the importance of messaging from the previous presenter. Ultimately, this is water use efficiency, and how we communicate is really the first step in achieving real water savings. And so we've had a partnership with Eastern Municipal, Western, San Bernardino Valley to talk about regional messaging and adapting as things change, whether they get better or worse. We could be flexible in our messaging. And we think it's very important because we can't limit messaging to our service area. A lot of the residents who live in the service area where I work may work in one of the different water districts and vice versa. So it's really important that we have a regional approach to this. In addition, we share a lot in common when it comes to development, climate. So a lot of things that are going on in San Bernardino and Riverside County line up very well. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all these drought actions here, but I just want to highlight that just like all the water agency, we have to take a multi-pronged approach to looking at how to address this issue. And these are all the actions that we're taking right now. Enhanced water use efficiency, increased communication with our retailers, looking for additional funding. And so we continue to focus on ways to make sure that we're not only addressing the drought now, but also looking forward to the future. And that's a good transition to a large project we're currently under construction right now. On the next slide, you can see our RP5 expansion project. This is our newest facility in Chino, built about 20 years ago, and we are expanding the capacity significantly, both on the liquid side of treatment and also the solid side. Why this is relevant for the drought is because it's going to produce more recycled water for us that we can either get in the ground or deliver to our customers. So we're looking to increase that capacity to double it. This is the first phase of that. So we're going to increase by about 50%. Then after that, it'll be 100% increase. Always invite anybody who's interested to come out to a tour. We're in an unofficial milestone right now where we're transitioning from concrete and steel to putting in all the mechanical equipment for that facility. Next slide, please. So RP5 is a good example of what we're doing immediately to not only deal with increased development and wastewater treatment, but also increased recycled water. I do want to talk about a program that we're currently evaluating called the Chino Basin Program. And this really is a result of the fact that we do get 1/3 of our supply from imported, and it's only from the state system. So when Proposition 1 was approved about 7 years ago, additional funds were available in 4 agencies who were able to shift off the imported supply. What we realized is we could take advantage of additional treatment that would help us with wastewater compliance and take advantage of the groundwater basin that we have in our region. So we developed a project and we're currently underway with the planning of that. Next slide. The concept is quite simple, and we can click through these slides pretty quickly. If we are able to produce more recycled water in the south, store it when we don't need it, use it when we do need it, then that frees up water in the north and to keep pulse flows in the Feather River to keep the salmon species happy. So the state benefits from an environmental standpoint. We benefit by receiving funds to help build this project. And right now we've got conditional funding of $215 million. So it's a pretty significant size. The state doesn't even like to call it a grant because this is really a partnership of a water exchange. We use more water down here by producing recycled water, and more water gets to stay up in the environment in the north. Next slide. Just want to point out some of the components, really what this program is doing. And I've struggled for a while in terms of how to explain this, but where I'm at right now is basically what we're doing is we're providing more recycled water for our customers, but instead of just building pipes that would convey that non-potable water, we're using the groundwater basin, injection wells, and extraction wells as our new conveyance system to get recycled water to areas that it didn't go before. The difference is the recycled water will ultimately be delivered as a potable water supply through the existing system, which really allows us tremendous savings by not building another pipeline system, and it allows our customers who currently don't utilize that recycled water access to it. So this map shows some of those components and how all our facilities work together. Essentially, we're going to be producing more recycled water through advanced treatment, running it through a reverse osmosis system so we get really pure water out of it, put it in the ground when we don't need it, and ultimately extract it in certain years when the state asks us to perform. Next slide, please. So just a few of the numbers. We're going to have 15,000 acre feet a year more of advanced treated recycled water. And this project in 2019 dollars is currently estimated at $650 million. And as I mentioned before, that conditional funding was about 1/3 of that supply. I feel the ultimate decision is going to be when we get that final cost, how we allocate that on the wastewater side and water supply reliability side. And ultimately, if our customers feel that it's the right cost, then we'll know we're going to go forward with that. And so that's something that we're working on right now. The last slide I have after this is just to show the complexity of this program. We've listed the agencies that are involved. We are going to be working with the state, but we are not a state project contractor like Metropolitan or San Bernardino Valley. So we do work through Metropolitan. We also have to think about all our customers here, regulating agencies, groundwater basin, managers. It is an adjudicated groundwater basin, so the parties, working with the parties there is an important part of this. And then ultimately our customers. So it's quite a complex project, and we're really excited to continue with the planning. I'd like to point out that our board did certify the EIR in May, so that was a great milestone for us, and always happy to provide updates. But ultimately, our big decision point is going to be in middle of 2023 on how to proceed. I think that's the last slide I have. So happy to answer any questions, and thanks again for allowing me to present this morning.
All right, thank you, Shivaji. A huge amount going on at IUA, and you sprinted through a huge workload that I know you're going through, and we all are going through on the local level. So let's hit the questions. So I want to thank all the presenters for sticking to their time so that we do have some time for questions. Please submit those questions through the chat function so we can get going. Panelists, we only have a few minutes, so if you could keep your answers short, but let me warm up the panel with a question for each one of you. Same question for each one of you. There's a common theme today of working together, and you've all touched on it, but you're all touching on it from a different level, whether it's federal, state, or the regional level. Can each of you very briefly share your thoughts on how these local communities, the people that are listening today, can engage federally, on the state level, and on the local level in terms of response to drought and long-term resiliency? Roger, why don't we start with you, since you were the first speaker?
Well, a couple of things immediately come to mind. One is, call us. All of our, federal emails are online, so you can reach out pretty easily. But the other thing that comes to mind is some, looking at Heather's presentation with the Quench website is, get involved in that and share it with everybody that you come in contact with. You wouldn't believe, you might. I mean, how many times when people figure out what I do, I just get peppered with questions and suggestions. But it's like we were talking earlier about the pipeline from the Great Lakes or from Houston, but that provides an opportunity for education about what is possible and what people can do, in their own homes and in their communities.
Thanks, Roger. Aqua Team, anyone want to address that?
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, Craig, that I think highlighting what local agencies are already doing, and specifically in terms of water conservation, that's one of the things that we're really focused on. I think there's this response from the administration. They've tried to be measured in, what kind of requirements they're going to place on local agencies regarding water conservation, water use efficiency. But there's a lot that local agencies are already doing. And I think that, Heather and her team and me and my team are trying to highlight what local agencies are already doing so that we don't have a state mandate that is a blanket mandate across all agencies. And I think it's also, reach out to your local electeds and talk about the importance of investment in infrastructure, in water infrastructure, not just conservation. Conservation is a part of that, but there are these other huge issues that need to be, funded in a really significant way. And so, certainly as a ledge guy, as a reg guy, I would say reach out to your local delegation. And I saw in the chat there was a question about Aqua's priorities. I can provide you with our list of priorities that maybe you can share with the group, and we're happy to have conversations with anybody on those priorities.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And we do share this recording, and so we will attach that to all the registered participants. Appreciate that. Heather, as the communicator, this is your world.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate what's already been said. I think, everyone in this meeting today is a leader in their community, right? Everyone here has a way to talk to a broader audience, and that education and that outreach to the broader audience is so key. There are so many important issues competing for our attention today. Your average California resident is bombarded with information about, COVID and the economy and so many issues. It's hard to get our message about water, whether it be conservation or investments in infrastructure, through to people. So the more people who are talking about that message over and over again, the more likely we are to be successful. So, anyone who's a leader and who has a direct connection to a larger number of people, just pushing out information, whether it's Quench California or Save Our Water or your local water agencies, communication efforts, anything, just helping push it out. The more we can do that, the more likely we are to actually hit people.
Thanks, Heather. Shivaji, any thoughts?
Yeah, real quick, nothing significantly new, but tell your residents to check their retailers or water providers' websites. We hear so many times residents are surprised about all the rebate opportunities that they didn't know about, and the best way to do that is to find out about it is the website. I will say one area that we need to improve on, and I think we as wholesalers do a good job, especially those on this call, is coordinated outreach. It's very confusing to residents. What's a water retailer? What's a wholesaler? What's metropolitan? And so the more we can coordinate that message, I think the better off the residents will be.
Yeah, we're not great at communicating to the public. That's for sure. We're good at communicating to ourselves about infrastructure. My own wife, when I say that, she says, "Why are you talking about building freeways and highways and bridges?" Roger.
Yeah, so as folks were talking, right now there's a lot of money. I mean, Adam was talking about the surplus in California. I didn't get into this in my presentation, but we've got EPA is getting $43 billion for the SRFs that will go to the states. That's a lot of money, but what we're seeing is the capacity to actually get it implemented. I mean, folks that are here, whether it's inland or Aqua or Eastern or Western, you guys are the more sophisticated water agencies, but there's a lot of folks on the ground that need help. And we're seeing a real lack of that technical assistance and getting the career path of people into the water industry. So I think that could be a great effort too, to get kids that are in high school, college on the water career path so that they can continue to implement a lot of this money that's going to be going on for decades.
Great. Okay. Speed round, individual questions. Get ready. First one I see. Roger, do you have a view on the likelihood of Shasta Dam being raised? This option would provide significant water storage benefit. I'm aware of it, but that's a reclamation project, so I'm not sure if they have funding for it or yeah. Craig, you guys probably, or Aqua, Adam and Heather, you probably have a better view on that. EPA we just review the EISs, so when we get it, we'll review it. So if we get it, but okay, thanks. Okay, Adam. The state's leadership seems to only put money out for local water projects and pushes conservation the main solution for water supply challenges. Why do you think there's such a hesitancy by the state's leadership to significantly invest in major statewide new water projects and conveyance when the system is failing to meet California's needs?
Yeah, oh, that's a big question.
That is a big question. Good luck, Adam.
Yeah, I'll say really quickly, there are some environmental groups in California that hear the word conveyance, right? And that's automatically a bad thing, or they hear the word storage and that's automatically a bad thing. We're trying to change perceptions of that. And we're not talking about, our funding, it's for a significant amount of that is for existing conveyance, existing dams. Let's make sure we're investing in those, right? If we can't agree on new conveyance right now or new storage. So, I think it's that, and you have a Democratic supermajority, and some very progressive members in the legislature. I think this is what happens when you don't have a more balanced legislature. You sort of have one side pushing in one direction, and so that'll be our challenge, is to really educate about what does it mean to invest in water conveyance, water storage. And how do we, convince members that that is something that we need to do now, because it's not going to get better. And when we have this $100 billion, how do we invest that in a smart way? And there are, habitat restoration and conservation projects we can invest in as well. But to your point, we need this big push, and we're going to be trying to get that done this year and next year.
Yeah, we need a big push, and I'm gonna have some closing slides to focus on that. I'm sure you're gonna want to stick around in here. All right, Shivaji, cloud seeding, is it part of a drought response? Does it have any merit?
Thanks. And before I get to that, can I just add on to the previous comment? I want to point out that IUA is not alone in terms of this investment into local supply infrastructure. Like I said, many of the agencies on this call have that commitment. What we want to see at the state level is a approach that complements the significant amount of investment we're making down here. We're always going to be prioritizing water use efficiency. We're building projects that increase the amount of drought-proof supplies out here, but we always need something to start with, and we continue to need imported supplies. So we really need to see the state commit to that. So I'm glad we're discussing that. As an example, cloud seeding is another thing that this watershed is looking at. Could this help us? I was skeptical before. I do think that it's worth evaluating. I think quantifying the benefits is going to be really challenging, seeing if it works. But what I've been seeing through the work SAPA has been doing, Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, is that it does have merit to look at and to evaluate. And so we're going to be looking at a pilot program over the next couple of years to see if this can help us. And so we appreciate SAPA's leadership on this. Will it be good for the Santa Ana watershed? Maybe, maybe not, but it's worth looking at. So it's one more example of things that we're doing here to try to make ourselves more resilient. So I appreciate that question. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Shivaji. All right, Heather, you didn't get left out here. With so many water-related funding needs across the state, how does Aqua prioritize which categories of water infrastructure funding to lobby for? Sorry, I said infrastructure. I know you said we can't say that in your campaign.
Actually, that's probably more of a question for Adam on prioritizing, issues for advocacy. So I should probably leave that to him.
Well, Heather, before you throw it back to Adam, because I know he wants to be the star of the show, but tell me how you decided your target audience for the Quench California campaign.
Sure. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. We had put together, Aqua is made up of a little over 460 members, public water agencies. And so we do a lot of our work is through them, through committee and task force. And we put together a committee of folks, communicators from various agencies to really shape the campaign. And they were the ones that said they wanted to try this target audience of, somewhat younger Californians, 25 to 45, because they felt that Aqua in the past, in the large education campaigns that we've done, were targeted toward older Californians, seniors, voters, that typical audience that you want to reach when you're connecting education with advocacy. But this group really felt that Aqua had previously ignored this younger demographic, and especially people of color and people in underrepresented communities. And they felt that there was still a value in educating them about this important topic. So we did decide, really all adult Californians are our target audience, but we are going to be putting some special emphasis in those groups.
Thank you, Heather. Adam, you got a couple seconds here to answer the question Heather threw to you.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize at Aqua?
Yeah, so, we're a member-driven organization. And so, we, at the beginning of each session, pull together our state infrastructure work group, and we just talk about priorities, things that didn't get funded from last year, things that, are still on the table. It's a 60 plus member work group, and we just, work through the different issues and identify what the ask is and where it should be on that list of priorities.
Excellent, thank you. Well, if I could, I'm going to take 2 minutes here to transition into something that is near and dear to my heart and to a lot of agencies across the state right now. This is the Solve the Water Crisis movement. So this is a coalition of water managers. Shivaji and IUA is one of our board members and has been in this since the very start. But this is a group of water managers who, when we sit around and talk about the future of water, we are very, very concerned about where the state is going. And I think that, let's go to the next slide. I think that Adam's comments about how hard we're struggling on the state budget with all these different priorities and the level of funding that we're getting to solve what is a major water crisis in this state. We're concerned about where those pockets of funding are and the quantity of money in those pockets. But the coalition it's an education campaign. So much like Quench, California, we're not advocating for particular projects, but we are trying to elevate that this is not a drought. This is a water crisis. The state needs to invest huge money. And when we say bold money, we're demanding bolder action out of the state. What does that mean? Well, if we have $5 billion in the state budget and the water managers look at the categories that money can be spent on, there's nothing for developing new water supplies. There's no storage. So what do we, I mean, we're short by millions of acre feet of storage on a statewide level. And as Shivaji hit on very well, we're running as fast as we can possibly run on local projects. We need the state to help us badly. So our solutions, we need to hit our thought leaders, all of our legislators, the administration, all of our business communities, the building community, the environmental community. We need more surface and groundwater storage. We need to be able to move water around in the state. The state is the 5th largest economy of the world. And that economic power was built on the state's ability to capture water, move snow melt across this state so that we can drive this economy. We need to fix the regulatory requirements that stop us from being able to move water in storms, to put it in IUAs and Chino basins, groundwater basins, so we can use it in dry periods. But we don't want to turn our back on all the hard work that Adam's doing to get water for all these local projects and all these other pockets of money that we really need. Next slide. So the ask is huge. And Adam hit on it. There's $97 billion in the state's pocket right now. And they're allocating 5 million or 7 million for water. We'll see how the budget plays out. Why can't they put $30 billion aside for water infrastructure right now so that we can build it over the next 20 years? I can't understand that as a manager. The coalition's growing. We have 20 paid board members. We have 48 interested parties. We're partnering with Aqua, CMUA, Southern California Water Coalition. We want to make sure that our messaging isn't counter to the messaging that Aqua or CMUA is doing. So a little advertisement for what we're trying to do here. All right, we're out of time. We've hit our 9 o'clock deadline. I know there's lots more questions that are stacking up and rolling in. We'll get those to the speakers and we'll get answers back to everyone. But I want to thank the panelists. Those were great presentations. We appreciate you coming in on a Friday morning and giving us some of your time. We really appreciate hearing the federal side and Aqua side. It's super valuable and we appreciate all your support. And Shivaji, keep cranking over there at IUA. We're in partnership with you to get those projects done. So our next speaker series will be August 26th, 7:30. We are excited, pass the word, get people to pay attention. We need more people to understand how important water is to this state and our region. So thank you very much, everyone. We're concluding the event and can't wait to see you in August. Thank you.